Overworked, underpaid, and undervalued. Forget about the let's clap for the NHS. These three words summarizes how our UK nurses are feeling today. I myself, having worked in the emergency department and hospital wards, I've seen firsthand how our nurses look after patients, from cleaning the bedpans to cleaning up sick to receiving abuse from patients and relatives. People would say, yeah, it's their job, that's what they're paid to do, but not even the relatives of these patients will do what these nurses are doing for their family. I've also seen the way some doctors will treat nurses like they're their handmaids or their personal assistant. And I've seen some other doctors, just like myself, treat nurses like they're valued members of the team. I mean, there are good nurses and there are bad nurses, like you would experience in any walk of life. A nurse is like the wheels of a car. The engine might work, but you cannot drive the car without its wheels. So that's what the NHS would be without nurses. The NHS simply cannot function. Now, there has been a lot of comments about nurses going on strike, people saying, oh yeah, but I'm underpaid too, but I'm not going on strike. Well, it's been 106 years, and since the inception of the NHS, nurses have never been on strike, so there must be a very good reason to. We know that the government has so far refused to hold a dialogue or meeting for talks over NHS pay, so the RCN, which is the Royal College of Nursing, held a ballot with over 300,000 of its union members, and they've agreed to go on strike. And this was across 180, at least up to 180 NHS trusts. So an NHS trust is basically made up of a group of hospitals in an area, and this includes hospitals based in London, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. I think Scotland has so far paused on their strike because they're holding discussions with the government. Good luck on that one. So why are nurses going on strike? Well, obviously, better pay. Inflation is 11%. The nurses have been having pay cuts since 2010. And there's been freeze in pay rises, and pay rises have been capped at between 1% to 3%, which is way below inflation. This is a slap in the mouth for hardworking nurses, if you look at the rise of living costs. So now what they want is they want a pay rise to be 5% above inflation, because the argument is that they've been 20% worse off since 2010. There's also been nursing staff shortages. Apparently 25,000 nurses have left the post, and there's about 50,000 unfilled nursing posts. Why are nurses leaving? Different reasons. Some nurses, there's a reduction in in students applying to be nurses. There's also nurses immigrating to other countries for whatever reasons, such as better pay. Some nurses have become agency nurses, where they receive double the pay that they would get if they worked under the NHS. So they could possibly be getting maybe 25 to 40 pounds an hour, depending on their experience and where they're working. Some nurses have moved to the private sector, where there's more opportunities, better working conditions. So working 9 to 5, not having to work nights, or they can choose to work nights if they want to. So more flexibility. Also, there is promotions, bonus. So the private sector is very attractive right now for nurses. And some nurses have left nursing altogether to do other things, whether it's business or other degrees that would earn more money for the family. So in the UK, you'd expect the average starting salary of a newly qualified nurse to be about £23,000. Some articles would say 25,000. Some articles I've read said 27,000. You can confirm that with me because I'm not too sure, but I'll put the lowest range and say £23,000. Maybe that depends on what part of the country you work in. Usually you get paid better in the south than you would in the north, especially in London, where you have London waiting because of the increased, cost of transport, accommodation and everything else. You'd expect to be paid better than someone who works in the north, such as maybe Manchester or Liverpool, for instance. If you've got 5-year experience, you might expect an average wage of between £33,000 to £35,000. As you know, in the UK, we have what we call banding, where basically a newly qualified nurse will start from band 5, and you expect them to progress and make their way up to, say, band 9, which is the level of a consultant. There's also the opportunity for qualifications and training along the way, where you can choose to become a senior nurse, a midwife, an advanced nursing practitioner, a matron. So these are all the different bandings. So the more you go up the banding, the more your pay scale goes up to. So maybe you could potentially end up earning maybe £40,000 plus or even more. So let's assume a nurse is earning £35,000, right? Let's assume this nurse is a single mom, has got 2 kids, lives in a 3-bed house, lives in London. What is the average rent or mortgage that you would expect the nurse to pay for a 3-bed house in London? You'd expect that to be between £2,000 to £3,000 a month. So £2,000 to £3,000 a month per year, that's £3,000 times 12, that's £36,000 per year. And this nurse is earning what? £35,000 per year. Also, you've got bills, okay? Utility bills, your energy and your gas bills, you expect to be paying maybe £300 a month for your utility bills. Transport, travel card into London, you could be paying anything from £200 to £300 a month. If you live just outside London, you could be paying £18 a day, just to get into London. So £18 times 20 is £360 a month. Then you've got your council tax. Depending on your banding, you could be paying anything between £120 to £170 a month on council tax. Then you've got food. You've got 2 kids who eat the whole fridge, who eat the whole cupboard. So you could be paying up to between £300 to £500 on food, unless you maybe go to Costco and you do some bulk buys. So really, as you can see, it's not viable being a nurse in the UK. You're earning £35,000 and your living expenses could be potentially up to £50,000 a year. And I've not even mentioned the cost of childcare. If you've got toddlers, cost of nursery, for example, you could be paying £1,000 per month, and then the other child, you might be paying £600 a month. So that's 1.6k for 2 children in nursery, depending on the age. 1.6 times 12, you do the maths. If it's a childminder, you could still be paying a similar amount, though slightly cheaper. So whichever way you look at it, it's just expensive to live in the UK and work in the UK as a nurse. And then you've got the unsympathetic guys who would say, oh, but they only work 3 days a week. Listen, they do a lot of hours in that 3 days a week. So an average nurse would work 12 hours a week on average. So that's 36 hours, but that's not including unpaid overtime. So in that 12 hours, if someone doesn't turn up to work or is off sick, they'll be expected to cover for that other nurse. So a lot of times they get paid, or they don't get paid at all for overtime. They do long hours, as I've mentioned. If it's busy, no breaks. And then they have to do this unsocial long hours at night time. And who's going to be looking after the kids at night time if they haven't got a spouse? These are all the sacrifices a nurse has to make just to look after a member of your family. Now, it is said that nursing in the UK is one of the most poorly paid when compared to other developed countries. So if you look at countries like America, Belgium, Canada, they pay better than nurses in the UK. So let's take a look at the list. Look at that. Top of the list, you've got Luxembourg. Luxembourg pays about £77,000. So Luxembourg is one of the highest paid countries when it comes to nursing. Scroll down a bit, you get to the US. The US pays about £55,000 on average. And then you've got Norway, Netherlands, New Zealand, Ireland, Canada, before you get to the United Kingdom. So like I said earlier, the United Kingdom pays about £33,000. Then just below that, you've got other countries like Finland, Spain, France, Italy. So for those who are going to hospital for appointments or for any other reason, just be aware that unless the strikes are called off, there are strikes taking place, 2 strikes in fact, on Thursday the 15th and Tuesday the 20th of December, which will be for 12 hours, so 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And depending on what the government says or doesn't say, there could be further strikes possible in the future. Doesn't mean that every single nurse is going on strike, but it's all about unity. So you'd expect that there are going to be nurses who are not even in NHS, nurses in the private sector, agency nurses, who might want to strike as well. And that also includes other NHS colleagues who are in support, such as the doctors, for instance. I mean, these strikes could not come at a possibly worse time. We're talking about the cold of winter, when you have a rise in admissions. There's obviously inflation going on. And there's still a backlog of appointments and operations since we had COVID 2 years ago. Now, other NHS workers are watching to see what success the nurses are going to have with the strikes. So we have your hospital porters, your paramedics, your cleaners, and even the junior doctors too, because this will set a precedent on what happens in the future. Because the government has thought that, oh, these NHS workers are so reserved, they're too cute, they'll just take whatever we give them, they're not going to complain or say anything. But now the NHS is having a voice, nurses are having a voice. Enough is enough. This cannot go on. I mean, Luxembourg is paying almost 3 times the amount of what you're getting in the UK. That is ridiculous. The US pays almost double the amount of what you get in the UK. That doesn't make any sense, and you wonder why nurses are leaving the NHS. So if you like this video, please feel free to share to others. And please drop some comments below. Do you support the strikes that the nurses are planning in the UK?